Well, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, she embarked on a 3-day official visit to Sri Lanka this week. And her visit covered the entire spectrum of India-Sri Lanka ties, from people-to-people connect, to trade, the economy, as well as celebrating 200 years of arrival of Indian origin Tamils in Sri Lanka. Now, the Finance Minister urged industry leaders for economic integration with Sri Lanka to mitigate the risk of the foreign exchange-driven crisis. She assured that India will continue to work closely with Sri Lanka on debt restructuring discussions and extending support for its economic recovery as well. But during her 3-day trip, Nirmala Sitharaman added that all over the world, there is clear interest in bilateral agreements and arrangements given the global situation. She further added that our countries would like to have arrangements in regional currencies so that there would be no shocks because of the currency's volatility. And also, considering Colombo's close ties with China, we also delve into what this means for India and Sri Lanka going forward. Listen in to Ms. Sitharaman first.
When Sri Lanka faced its unprecedented economic crisis a year back, we felt it was our duty to stand by with our friends in Sri Lanka. We could not bear the difficulties our friends in Sri Lanka had to face.
And joining us to discuss the big takeaways, Sri Lanka's youngest cabinet minister, Jeevan Thondaman. Thank you so much, sir, for making time for us on NDTV. Now, talks for the Economic and Technology Cooperation Agreement had taken place for several years during Mr. Sirisena's presidency, but they were actually suspended in 2018 with no headway. Take us through the significant takeaways from these latest round of talks.
Well, as you're aware, as far as the 12th round of the ETCA talks go, they took place between the 30th of October to the 1st of November. And, from 2016 to 2018, about 11 rounds had taken place, but clearly there were some issues. So this time, in the discussion headed by the President's Ministry of Finance, the issues that had popped up during the 11 rounds were brought up, they were reviewed, and also its implementation was also reviewed. So when the solution came down to basically dropping those 9 issues and marking them as resolved. And along with this, a special session was also allocated to discuss on the implementation of the India-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement and its implementation measures. So it's been quite positive, especially at a time like this for Sri Lanka, when we are just on our road to recovery. And I think last year, this time, our inflation was at 73.8%. And today we stand at less than 1%. So this is actually a remarkable story of recovery, and we couldn't have done it without our neighbors' support.
So it's clear, sir, that both our countries' vision is to strengthen maritime, energy and people-to-people connectivity. But sir, what does Sri Lanka need and how can India help currently?
Well, I think as far as our country is concerned, India historically, culturally, and also economically, in a sense, they've been our closest neighbor, our closest ally. And I think that was, quite proven in this economic crisis we faced for the past 2 years. And also in terms of connectivity, we just started the ferry service. And along with the ferry service, we're also talking about connectivity, not just in terms of human connectivity, but we're also looking at how we can expand into, as you mentioned earlier, the energy quotient.
Right.
And also we are looking at the e-commerce in the economic part of it as well. Because I think as the world is progressing, Sri Lanka, we have been a country that's been ravaged by war and various other tensions. So we are a bit behind in the race, but we tend to catch up quite fast. And especially with India being one of the largest economies currently. And I think what we would be looking forward to most is, in terms of sharing our resources, opening doors and getting in investments.
Right, so but post-COVID, many would argue that a new world order is emerging, the world order is being rejigged. Where do you see India-Sri Lanka ties heading now?
India has always been, in the past, known as a sleeping superpower, a country with so much potential and so much resources. I think India, even in FDIs, Nearly 50% of India's total FDI receipts have come in the last decade, and that's phenomenal. It's unfortunate Sri Lanka couldn't capitalize on that earlier, because had we attracted even 1% of the 400 odd billion dollars of FDIs that came the last decade, we wouldn't be in this crisis. So there's no point crying over spilled milk. I think it's now how we take things forward. And I think regardless of global political, geopolitical shifts, I think India is transforming into a financial powerhouse, and Sri Lanka being its closest neighbor, we need to capitalize on that. We need to be opportunistic.
But as we wrap, everyone is aware of Colombo's ties with China. In fact, Colombo's reliance on China as well. What does this mean for India and Sri Lanka's relationship going forward?
No, as far as Sri Lanka's ties with China is concerned, see, we have to be honest, we are an island nation that is sovereign. And we are of strategic importance, not just to China, not just to India, but to various other countries as well. And when that's the case, we have to do whatever is good for our country. In terms of, say, debt that was accumulated, if due diligence was not done, then it was on the leaders of that particular time. At the end of the day, transparency and accountability are what's needed, and that's what we are doing right now. So, given that, at the end of the day, Sri Lanka will always have its independence in its decision-making, and we will do what is best for the country and its citizens, similar to India's responsibility towards its citizens. For example, in the Russia-Ukraine war, if I'm not mistaken, India took a non-aligned stand because they had to do what was good for their citizens. So similarly, if we choose to take a non-aligned stand in this particular region, then that's what the due diligence we do for our citizens. But however, we do recognize the fact that India is our closest neighbor and our strongest ally. There's no doubt about that.
Right, sir. I am aware that the last 48 hours have been very hectic for you. I really appreciate you joining us on NDTV and taking out your precious time. Thank you so much for joining us.